Let's talk about how free, safe, and prosperous is Belarus right now, Jim. Let's talk about stuff that nobody's talking about, and we should actually spend a little bit of time on what's going on in Europe, on the easterly edges of Europe, Jim.
Right. So the Cold War never ended in the perspective that the entire Soviet sphere of control disappeared. Because there are nations that, in a sense, have a relationship with Russia today that almost duplicates the relationship with the Soviet Union, and
which they actually call the near abroad, right? And Belarus is one of those, and it's been ruled by Lukashenko for decades. Has been the country. They have elections. For the first time in maybe forever, they actually had real political opposition, and many people think that he actually fraudulently stole the election. And so that puts Lukashenko in a tough place, because actually Lukashenko the last couple of years has been looking for ways to engage with the West to kind of balance out the relationship with Putin and maybe become a little more independent. But now he's just scared. And so because of the nascent opposition.
Right. And so he's turning back to the opposition and looking for support from Russia. And we got to be clear on this. The people in the streets of Belarus are fighting for their vote to count. That I don't think that's up for. But having said that, that doesn't mean that they want to join the European Union tomorrow, and they don't necessarily like the Russians. It's a very pro-Russian country. Their culture is very integrated with Russia. Everybody speaks Russian. So there's it's not like Ukraine. People should never confuse that what's going on here is what's going on in Ukraine. This is a pro-Russian people.
But they want their votes to actually matter.
Right. But they want to get rid of Lukashenko. But here's the one thing Putin will not stand is having a Belarus which essentially potentially could move out of the Soviet orbit. So he's nervous. He wants to act. Of course, the Western Europeans are nervous. The most nervous, of course, are Lithuania,
the Baltics,
the Baltic states, right? Because if the Russians moved wholeheartedly into Belarus, essentially the front line would be right up against them, and then there's a very fragile connection between them, Poland, and the rest of Western Europe.
So what's happening this weekend? You were mentioning.
Oh yeah, so this is actually like the anniversary of the human chain, and the Lithuanians to honor that are actually doing a human chain from Belarus to Lithuania, but they're also doing a human chain in Washington D.C. from the Lithuanian embassy to the Belarusian embassy. It's from, I think, noon to 2. They're going to social distance. They're going to wear masks. but it's a notion of solidarity with the Belarusian people. You know, for the U.S. perspective, I don't want to say that this is a crisis that was made for Donald Trump, but this is a crisis that was made for Donald Trump. In what way? Well, it requires a prudent course of statesmanship that doesn't, on the one hand, say, okay, yeah, we're just going to send divisions, because we're not going to start World War III. On the other hand, we cannot turn our back on what is obviously a fraudulent election. Right. So we have to have a middle ground of support for a legitimate process, but the notion that it's not up to us, it's not our job, and we're not going to fix Belarus. And I think the message from the United States needs to be, hey, let the people of Belarus figure out the people of Belarus, and everybody should stay out of it, including you, Mr. Putin. And I think a strong message from the U.S. saying we should let the Belarusian people decide and determine their future and figure this out is the right course of action. And I think that's a policy that's tailor-made for somebody like Trump, who really does say, what's the American interest?
Yes.
What's the prudent course? How can we do good in the world?
Right.
I think we see that fundamentally under all of his decisions, and so we look for here. Great article that my buddy Kyron Skinner and I did on the national interest, kind of walks through this. Just came out today
on this issue.
Yeah.
All right, let's find that, Eric. Let's post that on our Twitter and Facebook feeds. You were formed in the belly of the beast that was the Cold War. For those who don't follow these issues, in the couple of minutes we have left in this segment, compare the Russia of then, the 1980s, 1990s, to the Russia of today. How much has it changed? How much hasn't it changed, Jim?
Well, the single biggest difference, I think, is the Soviet Union had a large cadre of captive nations,
yes,
which was an endless pool of resources, manpower, and everything else.
Right.
So it's like a vampire with his own personal blood bank.
Yeah.
Russia today doesn't have that.
Right.
And
it shows economically.
And I think even though many of Putin's instincts are to replicate traditional Soviet imperial policies, he doesn't have the resources to do that. But I think he has the ambition to do that. I think that makes him more dangerous, not less.